What's your "that's when the bully left me alone" story? I got a transfer at work from one work location to another. At the new location, a scummy 1A biker started calling me Cupcake. After the second or third time he did, so I asked him if he had a family, kids. Why? He asks. I'm just thinking how humiliating it's going to be for you when you have to explain to them that a man named Cupcake beat the ever-loving shit out of you. And that's when he left me alone. When I was in elementary school, I had to ride the bus to school. We had assigned seats, and I was put next to this high school kid, freshman/sophomore, for the first part of the route, until he would transfer off to another bus going to the high school. He was extremely overweight and a giant douche, emphasis on giant. He would do little bully-like things like make fun of me to get others to laugh at me, hit me with spit words, whatever. Annoying but not the end of the world. One week he decided to start physically bullying me by putting his backpack against me and smashing me as hard and as long as he could against the window every day. It hurt, it was gross, and I was tired of his shit. So on that Friday I brought a knife my parents had picked up at an antique store and stashed it in my jacket. Sure enough, he pulled the same stunt where he smashed me with his backpack, but this time I slid the knife into one of the outer pockets w/o him knowing. I then started a physical fight with him to get the bus driver's attention. She pulled the bus over and came to figure out what the commotion was all about. I then proceeded to claim that he had smashed me against the window and then started hitting me while threatening me with a knife that he had put in one of his backpack pockets. She took his backpack, found the knife, and before I knew it, school officials were whisking him away at the transfer stop. I don't know what happened to him or how much trouble he got into, but I never saw him again. Mine is a little more violent. When I was 12, I shone 5 feet 0 inches. My cousin was already 6 feet 0 inches. We are both 20 now, and he is 6 minutes and 10 seconds, 270 lbs. He was awful to me because of the size difference and just him being a massive asshole. He would call me names, push me down, and sit on me, start fights, etc. One day we were in my grandmother's yard playing soccer and he started acting like an asshole. I came up to steal the ball from him, and he punched me. What he didn't know was that the Greek goddess Artemis was looking out for me. I kicked the soccer ball as hard as I could, and it flew perfectly and slammed into the middle of his face. This overbalanced the big idiot and he stumbled into my grandmother's rose bushes. He then got yelled at for tearing up the bushes. After that his entire attitude towards me changed, and now we are civil at least. TL. Doctor. Bitch cousin got sniped with a soccer ball. Oh god, this was when I was 11 or 12 years old. There was this one classmate who kept harassing me. Started with small things and kept getting worse until he said something about my mother or something. That's when I turned around and tried to smack him in the face. He dodged and then shit got real on the playground. It ended with that he wanted to kick me and kinda tripped while doing it. I stepped back and saw his underwear. With no hesitation, I grabbed his undies and pulled it all the way up, like from the ground up. I dropped him on his face. Teachers came outside to settle the fight, was called to the principal office etc etc. I only said, he said something about my mom. You don't mess with my mom. No detention or punishment. And yay, he left me alone from that point on. Reposted from a similar question that I replied to about a year or so ago. I was the token quiet chubby kid in school. You know, the one who was into computers and nerdy things like that, while everyone else was playing sports and going to parties and such. I became a magnet for bullies and all of my classmates knew I was a wuss. When it started, and I fought back, I got into trouble with both the school and my mother, so I quickly learned to sit there and do nothing while the world picked on me. Until, in 8th grade, all students were expected to shower after gym class. It was a gang shower, of course, and pimply-faced chubby me wasn't looking forward to it. There was one kid, Scott, who wouldn't leave me alone. He was always snapping towels at me, pushing me around, and otherwise bullying me, while his friends looked on and laughed. I hated him with a vengeance. One winter day I had just finished showering, and was getting back into my clothes, when Scott decided to start with me. Here's the scene. 2 rows of lockers facing each other, about 8 feet apart, with a bench running between them. I was on one side of the bench and Scott was on the other. When he started up with me, I turned my back to him and mumbled, "Leave me alone." He pushed me into the lockers, hard. My head hit the lockers and I saw stars. Scott was now screaming at me, and the other boys in the locker room were starting to form a circle. Scott moved to the same side of the bench as me and was slapping the back of my head and taunting me, but all I heard was laughter. I snapped. I spun around and shoved Scott as hard as I could, screaming as I did it. The back of his legs hit the bench and he toppled back. The back of his head hit the lockers and his left arm flew into his open locker. Before he could move, I reached over, grabbed the locker door, and slammed it as hard as I could into his left arm. The door caught and pinned his arm inside. He screamed. I was screaming and crying, and I don't know what else. Someone grabbed me and pulled me off of him and dragged me into the gym teacher's office while all hell broke loose in the locker room. I don't remember much after that. I remember the gym teacher yelling at me. I remember the guidance counselor getting my stuff from my locker and me changing in the gym teacher's office. I remember washing blood off my hands. And I remember being escorted from the gym teacher's office to the principal's office. I was sent home, suspended for 2 days for fighting. The fight was on a Wednesday. I was suspended Thursday and Friday and returned to school on Monday. That Monday was very weird. People looked at me, pointed at me, whispered about me. I would walk down the hall and people would see me and get out of my way. One of my friends, who wasn't in the locker room that day but heard about it afterwards, told me that there was a rumor going around that I was smiling when I was beating up Scott. Lunch was exceptional. I sat with my friends as I usually did, and we made small talk about whatever video games we were playing, or whatever, but at the tables all around me nobody was talking, and I could feel them watching me. I looked over at the table where Scott and his friends always sat, but the table was empty. Scott returned to the school the following Wednesday. His homeroom was one door down from mine, so I saw him when he walked down the hallway. His arm was in a cast, his left eye was purple, his nose was clearly still swollen, his lips and cheek were tinged yellow and green, he had stitches on his left ear, and his left arm was in a cast and a sling. He made eye contact with me for a moment, then looked down. He walked past me without saying a word. I found out later that Scott had a minor concussion. His arm was broken in 3 places. He had severe lacerations on his arm. And apparently I beat the shit out of his face when he went down. He lost a lot of blood. The latch on the locker door had stuck closed, and they had to cut the door in order to release Scott's arm. He went to the hospital for stitches and to set the arm. He was out of school for 4 days. I don't know if he was suspended or if it was the result of my beating on him. Whatever the case was, that was the last time Scott or his friends ever got close to me, and with a couple of exceptions in high school, the last time I was bullied. I was still the token nerdy chubby kid, but word had gotten around. One bully from an old neighborhood would always make fun of me on the bus to middle school. A lot of people would laugh along with her, and I was always too embarrassed to throw any comebacks or argue with her in front of everyone. One day, I was in a pretty good mood joking around with a couple other friends and laughing out loud, and she turned around and I yelled, "Shut up. No one thinks you're funny." I quickly snapped back with, "Yeah. Everyone thinks you're fat," which she was. The whole bus and laughed. I stared her down until I saw the shame wash over her face and she sunk back into her seat. She left me alone after that. She ended up losing a bunch of weight about halfway through high school, and she told me that I helped motivate her to lose the weight. When I was a freshman, I had PE with a senior football player. One day we are changing out of our gym clothes after class and he says to me, "Hey dude, what would you say if I told you I was gonna put your head in this toilet?" I say, "I would ask if your dad has good dental insurance." He says, "What do you mean?" I say, "Well, you are definitely big enough to put my head in a toilet, but you're gonna lose some teeth doing it. Yeah, wanna give it a try?" He did not. I was in 3rd grade and a pretty quiet kid. My bully on the bus was an obnoxious 1st grader. He just wanted to torment me every day, physically and verbally, and I was too afraid of getting in trouble to retaliate. Plus he always threatened to tell his sister if I did anything. His sister was a 5th grader and also rode the bus. I told my dad what was going on, And he said, well, if you can't get him to stop and the driver isn't helping, just fight back. So the next time he started shit, I hit him in the stomach as hard as I could. He cried to his sister, who was basically like, haha, don't be an asshole then. It was pretty sweet. He was never a problem again. Not me, but one of my former middle school students. This kid was the smallest in the class and relentlessly bullied to the point of considering suicide. Now this kid was very proud of these Mexican-styled, pointy-toed cowboy boots. He wore them as often as he could. One day the possibly biggest bully in the school just wouldn't leave him alone. Well, with his short stature and pointy boots he had enough, and kicked this bully in the nads. He had to take his day out of school, but conveniently didn't have to make up much work, and gained a lot of respect from his peers. It was in 4th grade that I finally turned to the bully and screamed, "Stop making fun of me, you pathetic fucking piece of shit. Your daddy touches you, so you pick on other kids? Fuck off." Not sure if he had been molested, but he never bullied again. As for an explanation of my colorful language, I kept to myself and behaved, but I knew every word from listening to my parents fight constantly. I was at soccer camp one summer, must have been 12 or so. This one a shat of a kid, probably about a year older and 6 inches taller than me, was being a dick. For example, came to lunch and all my friends were sitting there, he was among them. As I sat down, he asked me to raise my arm, so I did. Saw that I only had a little bit of armpit hair, I was fucking 12 years old, guy, give a break, and started making fun of me in front of my friends. I shrugged it off, because I recognized his bullshit for what it was. Sat down and ate lunch, no big deal. A couple days later I'm standing in line waiting for something, none of my friends with me. I'm not paying attention to much, when out of nowhere someone says, "Hey, does this hurt?" And before it even registered in my brain, I felt what was the cold, sharp end of a soda can tab, freshly torn from its can, scrape across the back of my neck. I instinctively jabbed my elbow back as hard as I could, and felt the blow sink home into his gut. I turned around, and it was that same fucking bully kid from the other day. He sank back as I brought my arm to my neck to check for blood. "What the hell, man?" he demanded. I just wanted to know what it felt like. He was standing up tall now, still a few inches taller than me, and puffing his chest out. "What the fuck do you think it felt like?" I asked him, obviously pissed. "You wanna know? Scrape it across your own neck, dumbass." I stood right up to him, refusing to back down. All anger, no fear, ready to fight this fucker, even if he was bigger. He backed down, not actually thinking I was going to stand up for myself. Little insecure shit. A bully in my school, we'll call her V, came from a very well respected family in the town. It was a huge deal to V, to keep her image up. Having the perfect family that did no wrong was very important to her. She always bragged about her mother's charity work, her dad's ranch, her spot in the church choir, all the aspects of her perfect life. On the day of our 8th grade graduation, V's family hosted a brunch for all of our class. While there, I went to the bathroom at some point. While I was in there, I stepped on something sharp. It was a needle. What the fuck? Why is there a needle on the ground? Whatever, I washed my foot off, threw the needle away, and went back to my classmates to enjoy the day. 2 weeks later, we had a BPA, Business Professionals of America, a school program, fundraiser for the upcoming school year. Usually, V's mom volunteers to help out with fundraisers, but she was nowhere to be found. Strange, but not a big deal. V and I did have one close mutual friend, R and I were working on cleaning up after the fundraiser when she told me that V's mom was in rehab for the 4th time in 2 years, heroin addict. So school comes in a few months, and V is making fun of my boyfriend, K, for living with his broke brother and not being able to be on the golf team anymore because he had to get a job and help pay bills. K was always shy, not really willing to speak up for himself. So when V said, "Well, it's not like you'll be missed on the team, you can't even afford good clubs," I looked at her and said, "Sure, K and his brother are poor, sucks for him, but at least his brother isn't a junkie." Her jaw dropped, and although it was only K, R, and I around, I could tell she was extremely embarrassed. After that, she never spoke to or about K and I again. High school me could be a bitch sometimes. I had a bully that would steal my lunch, specifically my drink. So, my friend had the idea that if I just made it unpalatable one day, he would stop. I got a resealable container with a screw off top and filled it with punch, a red liquid with every awful thing I could find in my mother's kitchen, a ton of salt and some alum powder, Tabasco sauce, crystallized ginger, mustard, etc. The next day, as I was eating my lunch, he showed up again, grabbed my drink and downed the whole thing in one gulp. He took 2 unsteady steps and threw up on the ground. That's when the bully left me alone. There was a high school water polo jock. It wasn't necessarily bullying, but he liked rough horseplay and made offensive jokes and whatnot. He used to put me into headlocks into his crotch and whatnot. And then I came out gay. I thought it was pretty hilarious when this high school jock was scared of me, haha. It was a mix of an Office Space type moment where I realized I just didn't give a shit about what they thought, and realizing my height, 6 feet tall female by age 14, was more intimidating than it was something for them to make fun of. I decided I was perfectly happy if nobody liked me after it, walked about 2 inches from their body, looked down, and said very calmly but sternly, "What did you say to me?" It never happened again, at least not to my face. I hung out with the other social rejects mostly. They were cooler and much more fun, and I'd realized I could bluff my way out of a real fight just by being confident in my stature. He was slapping me around as usual. I started to react differently by my junior year in high school. I literally just looked him in the eyes and told him to stop. I think this would stop most bullies in most cases.